Welcome to the All-In Recruitment podcast by Manatal, where we explore best practices, learnings, and trends with leaders in the recruitment space. If you like our content, please subscribe to our channels on YouTube and Spotify to stay tuned for our weekly episodes. My name is Lydia, and joining us today is Sandra D'Souza, founder and CEO of Ellect, based in Sydney, Australia. Hi, Sandra. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Lydia. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Sandra, you have had an extensive career of more than 2 decades now, and your background is in finance. And then you moved on to social entrepreneurship, right? And I understand that it was in this period that you've become a strong advocate for gender equality and women in business. So tell us about your journey towards advocating gender equality.
It was always interesting to hear about my background being, relayed by someone else. Well, I actually founded an international digital marketing agency 10 years ago. So I had a step from finance to marketing and really, got my knowledge around all things to do with entrepreneurship. But how this journey I started with advocating gender equality also started 20 years ago when I was when I joined an international NGO that as a volunteer, and quite quickly they somehow recruited me, and we have elections, and so I became the state president here in Australia, advocating gender equality with the state government. And then not long after that, I was part of the international executive board, where the organization's affiliated with the United Nations. So I was fortunate to see from grassroots level all the way to international level of all the various gender equality activities around the world, and across all various type of research, and also seeing the change over the last 20 years. And when I had an opportunity for my business to be acquired in 2018, I thought, this is the space I want to be. So I founded Ellect, and it was a time that I felt, being in this space for so long, that people were beginning to listen. So not long after the Me Too campaign and around the Black Lives Matter, what was happening was that people who knew about my work were people. When I'm actually talking about people, I'm talking about men. They used to say, yes, Sandra's off to her secret women's business, because I was volunteering. So I always have to juggle with both my corporate career and my work in gender equality. But they started asking me questions and wanting to understand more about it. And it made me realize that there is a growing awareness, and it was time to really accelerate the work that I'm doing. And that's what led me into this journey, and how I started Ellect.
That period of 2 decades, that you would have seen many changes, or you would have seen how the conversations have evolved, and how has it evolved?
Oh, absolutely. So for, let's say, the first 15 years, it was very much that you don't get any mention in publicity. It's like the best kept secret. Nobody wants to talk about gender equality. Not everybody understood the issue, and it was a lot of the conferences and events, it was women talking about women, about gender equality issues. What has changed in the last 5 years is businesses embracing it, men talking about it, men also who would advocate for gender equality but couldn't really talk about it openly, were beginning to talk about openly, and also implementing that in business. ESG has also helped with the push. And certainly, I think the Me Too campaign was the catalyst of the first step of awareness. And so from being no one talking about it in the mainstream to now being very much mainstream, that has been a significant change. And seeing the younger generation also calling out bad behavior and not accepting inappropriate behavior has been a real catalyst for change.
And Ellect is focused on ESG particularly, and how businesses can achieve their ESG goals at DE&I. It's 3 years now, right?
So it's 3 years. I can't believe time has flown so quickly. Elect is part of the ESG, but it's more part of the S. As you got the environment, social, and the governance. So Elect is very much the S part of the ESG goal, and the focus initially over the 3 years, we started off with supplier diversity, which was part of the pandemic, with all the chaos around the supply chain. And there was that focus of, let's look at local businesses, let's look at local suppliers, let's look at, and a lot of local businesses have diverse background. And then also supporting gender equality. So then we also look at Elect Stars, which is about pushing for gender equality in business leadership. Both are important elements as part of the ESG goals. And so I guess that's how Elect is supporting businesses who's trying to achieve ESG goals.
So the past 3 years have been critical. We've seen communities, businesses enter the pandemic period and also come out of it. Now we're in post-pandemic. So you've gone through that wave. What are some key learnings you've had in these years, particularly around action on gender equality in business?
A lot. It's been a really crazy time. Yeah. So the key, it certainly has been an interesting time, and the shift in the demand for diversity was very much accelerated. There is still, I will also put that there's still a lot of work to do, but what has been interesting in terms of the key learnings is how much the pandemic has forced businesses into I don't know what we call processes or environment, but to think about alternative ways of doing business. So I talked about, I know, the supply diversity, but it also brought about like everybody working from home. So women need flexibility at work, and I know we've with my colleagues, and I'm with a part of the international NGO, with various discussion. We say that in organisation, we need to introduce flexible working hours, flexibility, working from home, and companies would push back and say, oh, it's not possible, companies won't be productive. And guess what happened? When everybody had to work from home, no business kind of like fell apart. In fact, they saw greater productivity, and things just kept going. And so what the pandemic has actually shown us is that entire workforce can work from home and it doesn't kill a business. And so it has made that transition for flexible workplace, kind of like environment, much more feasible, and it's been implemented. So it allows that diversity piece now to come in, because it's not that it has to be 9 to 5 in the office, you'll commute to the office, you'll go home, you can't do family stuff, you can't do anything outside of the office hours. So I know that there's not everything was so strict, but what the pandemic has shown us is that we can work in a hybrid model, we can work in a flexible model, we can take into account of the needs of staff, and still be able to run a business and still be productive. And when you also throw in, with more recently the Great Resignation, it's very hard to attract talent. It's very hard to keep talent. What it shows is that businesses are no longer in that position, dare I say, power, that they do need to try and make their environment attractive for top talent to be able to come to their company. And how do they do that is to offer an environment that makes them be able to balance work and life.
So now that we've seen the effects of the pandemic on how organizations approach or view flexibility in the workspace, and also take into consideration some needs, especially for women in the workspace and their workforce, how have you gone about approaching raising awareness of DE&I, especially now post-pandemic? Have you seen any changes?
Well, this is also part of the work that Ellect is doing. So Ellect Stars, if I could just go back a little bit, what Ellect Stars is about. We started off with a bit of research. We went through all of the listed companies in the Australian Stock Exchange, in NASDAQ, and some in London Stock Exchange. And what we wanted to see is how much, gender diversity has been achieved in the top senior, in the senior leadership and on the boards. So we went through, we selected four basic criteria, and we rate them and we give them a point. They get a point if they have a woman, at least one woman, in the CEO or CFO duo role. They get a point if there's a woman board chair. They get a point if there's at least 25% of women in boards, and they get a point of 25% of women in senior leadership team. And if they achieve 3 or more points, we consider them eligible for Ellect Star. So I'm going to ask you, I know you're asking me all the questions, but let me ask you this question. How many companies do you think have achieved 3 stars or more?
And I would say maybe 30 to 40% of that.
Okay, less than 5%. Less than 5%, and we're in 2022. But these are listed companies. All of them would have DE&I policy in there and claiming to do a lot of things and employer of choice. But, are they actually achieving DE&I in these organizations? They haven't. So what we're doing then with Ellect Stars, that is the awareness that we're trying to introduce for DE&I, is to start off with gender equality, and is that if a company has achieved 3 or more of just the 4 criteria, and it's not subjective, it's very, very clear, you've either achieved it or you haven't, we consider them having achieved gender equality in business from the top. And that's how we're trying to approach this, because in 2022, with all the policy and the awareness and also the movement, we're still seeing, you thought 30, 40%, but only less than 5% have got both.
Is this shocking to many people when you bring it up?
It's really funny that you say that, because I get that, but yeah, I'm not surprised. Both. So they'll say like, oh my God, but then I'm also not surprised, And so, and I was the same. Like I said, across all the research, I thought Australia was really quite, ahead with the work and the stock exchange. There is governance reporting to say, what are you doing in having women on boards? So I know that there is some growth in achieving that. But I was quite surprised if you combine with having women CEOs, women in senior leadership and boards. Actually, not many companies have achieved that.
So obviously there's so much work to be done. And there are clearly many challenges that organizations face. Either they're addressing them or they're not. So in your experience, what are some challenges that these companies are facing in terms of the implementation or the action around policies to support diversity and attracting diverse talent, really?
And so that was a question I wanted to know from doing that research, and what makes these less than 5% of the companies different from the others. And so what I've done is that I've reached out to those CEOs, and I've been interviewing them, and I'm actually writing a book about it.
Oh, when's it coming out?
So hopefully, I actually just spoke to the publisher. We're looking at February 2023. But I can give you some insight in terms of so far what these CEOs have told me. Like how have they done it? It didn't matter about the industry, whether it's male dominated, female dominated. It didn't matter whether it's a small sort of business to large, tens of thousands. And it didn't matter if the CEO is a founding CEO or a newly hired CEO, who has jumped into the role. As long as the CEO has put that as part of their vision of wanting diversity and inclusion in their business, starting with the top, that's how that was consistent across the line, and that's how they've pushed. I've spoken to CEOs, and that will be part of the book, is that they come into it and they see all white male board members and all white male leadership team, and said, I want 50-50. Kathy actually said that. And like I said, it doesn't matter about the size of the company. And whether it's their personal value or whether it's they say, this is the time, we can't still be operating at this level, one way or another, they have pushed for the change. And then they do need to try and get the support of the board and the leadership team. And it could be also changing board members and things like that. But it's the CEO who has been pushing it. And that's what I found the main difference with other CEOs who have said, yes, I want to do it, but it's really hard. We are implementing it, but we're not getting the results. But that's the main difference, is that the ones who are getting results are the ones who actually truly put that as part of their vision for the business.
Interesting, because many organizations want to ensure that their DE&I initiatives or programs, they seep through the entire company, really. And many of them have even begun implementing non-discriminatory policies, diversity events, and even training on unconscious bias. And these are all great first steps. But there is still the challenge of embedding DE&I into business practices and processes. So what might be some ways for organizations to work towards this?
I think it's fantastic to have these policies and the training that you've described, and they're important to set up the framework and the guidelines for how everyone should behave or how to encourage them to include diversity inclusion. But nothing speaks louder than actions, and the actions do need to come from the top. So that hasn't shown me from my research is that you have, I don't know, like, I guess I'm showing my age. I remember, 20 years back, where you go through the whole exercise with the whole company, you put it in your vision, your mission, and say, hey, we want to do this, but nobody in the company believed it, and it wasn't part of the culture. If the culture is not inclusive, how do you bring in diversity? So you really need the culture. Where do you get the culture from? It needs to be driven from the top. And so you need to really have it as part of the vision, but also the CEO driving the actions to say, this is happening. We need to embed it into our business practice. Let's start from the diversity, from hiring from the top. If you don't see diverse leaders, the diverse leaders don't hire diverse managers. So that's where I think the action speaks louder, and that's how you actually start getting some change. They have to practice. They have to do what they say they're doing, and it doesn't just become just a PowerPoint presentation or a PDF document that sits in the company library and nobody refers to it. It's actual actions, and there are various ways, trading in and all that. Like I said, they're just as important, but you need to see from the top. If you're talking about the diversity, and you're talking about it, but yet you look up and you still see no diversity in the senior leadership team or in the board of directors, then that means the company's not really fully embedding what they're talking about and what they're preaching into the top level management.
And once it's embedded, there is also the responsibility to keep it going, right? So what are some ways for HR or HR leaders or even business leaders really to ensure that their DE&I strategies and policies are sustainable in the long run?
So it's about creating habits. It's about making sure that you have what I call a system or a rhythm, so that everybody has these habits of doing one of the actions that's relating to D&I, and then building from that. If you don't mind a little plug, so we've partnered with Cred. Cred is a software that, in simple terms, is really to help people to build up good actions. And very simplifying. So if I give you an example, and this is also talking to other organizations, one of the things we'll say with Cred is let's have a buddy. Let's have a mentor who's a female mentor, type of thing, and or let's celebrate one of the items on the diversity calendar, and just have that as part of the action, that everybody do something towards it, because like I said, action speaks louder than just words. And by doing that, that will help, that the employees will see that the leaders and HR are fully committed to what they're saying about DE&I, that they are really trying to change the culture to make it inclusive, and it's driven from the top.
Moving into HR and talent strategies, a big part of ensuring there's diversity in your hiring is also to ensure the creation of recruitment teams that are diverse. So what might be some factors that leaders of recruitment agencies or even heads of recruitment teams should think of when they structure a diverse team of recruiters?
I'm so glad that you're asking this question, because, as you know, it is human nature that people we kind of like hire like, right? So without diversity in the recruitment team, there's a tendency that we just hire people that we're used to, that we like, that looks like us, talks like us, and then we just keep this whole homogenous kind of like cycle of hiring that. So it is very important that the agency leaders and the heads of recruitment must have this diverse team when it comes to recruiting. And that's one step. That's the action. Also, another action to say, yes, we believe in diversity and inclusion. We will make sure that the recruitment team is actually of diverse background. And so, in terms of what they can think about when building that, not only having that diversity as a recruitment team, is also ensuring that the language of the job ads are neutral, or that they suit. So, for example, if they're looking to have more women, in certain roles, just to help with the balance, then make sure that the job ad, so without saying like we want more women, but to show the culture that it's far more inclusive and that it has flexible working environment, just as an example. But otherwise, neutral language is really important. And also to start off with just having a very objective hiring criteria, so that the diverse teams, so that the recruitment team all agree that's how we're going to do it, or they're going to do it. And I find blind resumes help as well. Which, because it's just human nature that you look at the name, you look at the age, you look at various things. If you take them out, and research have backed this up, that when you take away those details, more people with diversity tend to get hired through that process as well.
We've heard quite a bit about the term intersectionality, especially in conversations around DE&I. So how would you define intersectionality?
I think I'm a great example of that. I have to say I love this word, and why I love this word is also, it's a sad kind of like way of describing it, but I love it because it's the whole thing about raising awareness, right? So intersectionality for me is a broader definition of systemic discrimination in multiple forms. So take me for an example. I was in corporate at a very young age, so I was young. Most management team members are much older and in their 50s, and I was in my 20s. I was a woman also, so in a team that was all mainly men, and I was a woman, young woman, and I was also brown. And so that is intersectionality, part of it. But then it can also be extended in terms of your gender identity, and your socioeconomic status as well. I don't mind talking about my personal life, but I had a single mum who raised and worked very hard, so we weren't really fortunate. But I was just lucky, with scholarships and with hard work, to get myself out of that cycle and to embark on this amazing career journey for myself. But not everybody can do that, not everybody who automatically gets certain opportunities. So I think that's what intersectionality kind of like raise awareness, to say that we are trying to approach equality, but we need to recognize the differences in everybody. Yeah.
And it's been suggested widely, really, that the use of pronouns, especially, we're talking about gender now. The use of pronouns creates a more inclusive workplace. So what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's fantastic, absolutely fantastic, because what has happened, and I think it really has accelerated in the last 12 months, especially when it got introduced in LinkedIn, that we need to say, or to show our pronouns, that we have moved this discussion, this awareness into mainstream. And so I am seeing since then in the professional setting, in LinkedIn posts, and also in personal setting, in, like, let's say Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, people saying, like, I would prefer to be used they, as a pronoun, and feel comfortable and not being mocked and not being criticized or isolated from this announcement, and allowing people to be themselves, because it's for me, yes, I can't hide my skin color, but it is not an inclusive society if we have to hide our true self. And so it does lead towards inclusivity, and pronouns is a great first step, I think, into bringing that into that mainstream conversation.
And it's great that you see it on social networking sites, and you see it where many people are able to be exposed to it and also to be able to use it. And then you have features that allow people to know how your name is pronounced. And I think that's quite powerful as well in terms of diversity, right? So let's discuss maybe the use of technology in terms of HR. And you mentioned earlier about blind resumes. Let's discuss the use of HR technology to support diversity. A study, I believe this is PwC, has shown that 58% of companies use HR technology to find, attract, and retain top talent. So how might technology, in your opinion, how might technology help to ensure diversity in hiring practices?
Well, I can tell you how not using technology where it doesn't help. Because if you don't use technology, what are you leaving it to? You're leaving it to unconscious bias. You're leaving it to subjective process. You're leaving to using your, potentially your own network rather than really seeking out attracting top talent. And that's what technology actually helps overcome, these barriers when it comes to really recruiting diverse and top talent, because the technology allows the companies to break out of their small circle and really reach out to the network and find the top talent that suit them, and using tools like you said, like what we discussed just then, blind resumes, and really see people in their abilities, and to be able to give them the opportunity to apply.
So moving in that direction, how should recruiters and HR leaders prepare to adopt diversity in hiring?
I think this answer I'm just going to give out based on the research that I've done, and also as part of my book, and really need to go and seek out where the technology allows you to do that, and to seek out those niche platforms as well, for where women, where people with a certain background would be, utilizing. So let me give you an example. There's a company that I was, was advisor to, of wanting to attract more women data analysts. But it wasn't easy. It was something that they want to do, and it wasn't something that was challenging. And part of what we did was with technology, such as, I think, Manatal, that you can reach out to specific platforms where people from a certain country tend to use as a job search boards to find them. So with data analysts in Australia, there are actually immigrants from China, Iran, who have strong data engineering background, and they normally would not necessarily be in the main job board side, or they're not easily found. And it's taking a proactive approach to find them. And so this is where I believe that the technology will make it easier for the recruiters to reach out and find the appropriate candidates, because it allows for that little bit more of the proactiveness of the suitable candidates.
And there's also the role of employer branding. Now, if DE&I and gender equality and everything else is already seeped through an organization and every aspect of it, it has to come out through the brand. It has to be seen through its voice. So what, in your opinion, might be the role of employer branding to attract and keep diverse candidates today?
Well, that's you're absolutely spot on. You're absolutely spot on, because that's the reason why we have Ellect stars, because we want that to be the proof for employers to show that this is proof that we're committed to gender equality. And gender equality is not just about gender equality. What I've seen in the research also is that when that companies are committed to diversity and inclusivity, they achieve gender equality. And so that's part of the employer branding. And I know that there are different accreditation what companies can do, but with Ellect Star, and I'm sorry if it sounds like a little bit of a plug, but I'm very proud of this. It's basically very straightforward criteria, and it really clearly shows that these companies that truly believe that they're committed into diversity and inclusion, and that's how they manage to have gender equality. So employers need that sort of accreditation, if I call it, to stand out and to show potential candidates of diverse background, to say, here you are, we have the proof that we're not just talking about it. It's not just policy. Not only do we have the culture, we have diversity at the top level. And that's where I think it's important for employers to showcase that. And that's because it's important. Like companies succeed by having great talent, and you also want to retain that talent. So yes, you use employer branding to attract them, but it's just as important to retain them. And that's where something like Ellect Star will help them.
I like how we've gone from senior leadership, board leadership, to managers, to practices in an organization, and finally moving into what you project as your company, especially now when people are looking out for all these aspects. We have Gen Z coming in,
Exactly.
who are going to look out for all these things in terms of value, right? So thank you very much, Sandra, for your time and insight. So if anyone wants to look out for you, where can they connect with you?
Thank you so much, Lydia. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you, and well done on putting this podcast together. They can also look for us on LinkedIn and also on our website. So I have my profile on LinkedIn, which is quite active, but also can reach out through our website. Our website details are ellect.biz. It's ELLECT.biz.
And we have been in conversation with Sandra D'Souza, founder and CEO of Ellect, based in Sydney, Australia. If you like our content, please subscribe to our channels and stay tuned for more weekly episodes of All-In Recruitment.